And so speaking of home values, but I want to statistically give you some details about what we're seeing in the market in September and October. We saw 3,500 sales roughly in both September and October. Peak was near 7,000. So and that is in between, that's Hillsborough and Pinellas County. So we're around half the last couple of months, the number of total home sales. So half the amount of demand, which means fewer showings, fewer contracts, less activity. And so I want to go through the stats, and then I want to talk about the why behind it. To give you a perspective, in May of this year, we had 5,800 sales, and then we had 3 months in a row, as well as March, hovering right around 5,000 sales. So while we weren't quite at the 7,000 of peak, when you go from 5,000 to 3,500, that's a 30% drop in the number of homes sold. And a lot of those sales that happened in September and October were contracted before the storms, either that got pushed because of the storms and ended up closing. Actual demand is even lower than what we're showing, and I think we're going to see some of that reflective in November, December, because what I'm seeing is fewer showings, less buyer demand, less activity overall in a lot of different price segments. We do have a really broad geographic market though, so there are areas of town and price points and product types that are doing better than others. But let's talk about the average sale price. We're at $474,071. Compare that to June of this year, we were $507. So we have seen about a 5% drop in home values since the summer. Our $474 of this year in October compared to last year, it was $479. And September was $489 last year and $475 this year. So we are seeing depreciation in Hillsborough and Pinellas County when all product types are factored in. So that is all residential real estate. Now you can drill down and look specifically and see that the depreciation is worse in condos than it is in single family homes, as well as the inventory, the supply and demand curve. There are still inherent problems in condos that were happening prior to the storms. The milestone surveys that were required, the building that collapsed in Miami that caused a massive increase in condo and HOA fees because of massive increase in insurance, all contributed to the downward trend on the condo market. So, speaking of other statistics, we are at 97% list to sell price ratio. We've been at that most of this year. Peak was 100 and 101. So we're still not selling for drastically below asking, but we have seen softening in price and we have seen softening in negotiation. So sellers have to be more receptive to paying concessions, more receptive to price reductions. The market isn't unfortunately in the favor of the sellers much anymore. Days on market continues to trickle up as well. A year ago, it was 41. Today, it's 67. That's nearly a 50% increase in the number of days it takes to sell a home, and that number is continuing to rise. Additionally, we have 4.96 months of inventory. That is the second highest amount of inventory we've seen in more than a decade. The first highest was last month at 5.33. So we do have rising inventory, and I believe that trend, I wouldn't be surprised to see us, at 6 or 7 months of inventory within a few months where you start to talk about being more of a buyer's market. And I've talked about this before, how we have two separate real estate markets going on. We have a single family home, and then we have the multifamily kind of condo, townhome stuff. The condo market is performing worse than the single family market for sure. And it is definitely a buyer's market when it comes to condos. We will have clients call us to sell a condo and we'll look at it and there are 25 for sale and one that sold in the last month. So the saturation rate is very unfavorable towards sellers when it comes to condos. If you are not pricing your condo, first off, if you don't have to sell your condo, maybe you shouldn't. And if you have to sell it, you are going to have to price it super aggressive. Forget what sold 6 months or a year ago. That's fantasy land. It's over. You missed it. Now, with as many condos are on the market, prices are definitely softening, depreciating, and it is a buyer's market in many, many, many condo communities throughout Tampa Bay. So the 5 months of inventory, we've always said below 6 months is a seller's market. And so we've been a seller's market at least 6 or 7 years in Tampa below 6 months of inventory. We are starting to creep to the point where we may surpass the 6 months of inventory over the next few months, which turns us into a market that is more typical of a buyer's market. Some other statistics to look at. Again, I mentioned the hovering around 5 months of inventory. We were 3 months early in the year. More than 50% increase in the month supply of inventory. So why is that happening? Why are our statistics showing depreciation? Why are we seeing homes sit longer on the market? Why are we seeing far less buyer traffic, far less showings? Well, really three things. First, the overall economy as a whole has had some problems for a while. We know that interest rates have risen. We know prices have stagnated. We know it's become more unaffordable in Florida. So as prices go up on real estate and interest rates go up and insurance goes up, eventually something has to give. Well, what has been giving is prices. We saw a run up for more than a decade of increase in home values into 2023. And since then, or actually it hit it in May of 2022, it hit 475. Well, we're still 475 today, 2.5 years later. So we have not seen much appreciation, if any, in our entire MSA for the last couple of years. And that's because of high interest rates and economic conditions. They're now starting to balloon. You add on top of that, I would say like two of the worst storms Tampa Bay has ever seen, from flooding and damage and a presidential election, all on top of that right before the holidays. And it's literally the perfect storm of how could you create a recipe to make Tampa Bay's real estate market, drop in sales and drop in value. That is kind of the perfect storm. So we've got all these economic events. You've got an election, you've got two storms, all contributing to a black eye on Tampa Bay. And what has fueled our real estate market for the last decade plus is a continual increase in population. During COVID, some of the draconian COVID measures in northern states moved people down here. Some of the ability for people to work remotely caused them to retire sooner or move down here. We saw a massive population increase, which was driving demand for real estate and driving prices up because our population was growing. Well, now, post-storm, and again, there's no way to know for sure where we'll be in 6 months or a year, but we suspect we're not going to see population growth for a while. So in addition to all these economic indicators and sellers wanting to sell and leave because of the storms, now we're having people say, well, now I don't know if I want to go there because I saw that devastation on TV and they don't show sunshine and rainbows every day on CNN and Fox News. They only show it when we have a storm. So when that's the national news media story that we got hit with two really bad storms, it makes people not want to move here. So it reduces our demand and increases the number of people that wish to exit and sell. So all of these things, and then of course you had a polarizing presidential election that caused buyers to sit on the fence and say, you know what, I'm going to wait until after this election before I buy or sell. And especially with the storm, they wanted to wait. We were already hearing that from countless consumers before the storms ever showed up, that buyers were waiting until after the election. So all of these things have caused fence sitting. Until or unless we start to see population growth kind of start to trickle back in our direction and interest rates, some relief to make things a little bit more affordable, I think we're going to be in this similar place where we start to see some depreciation in our market. Not massive. We're not talking great recessionary stuff. We're not talking huge drop. I don't see us getting values rising, a dramatic increase in home sales until things get more affordable and we get population growth back. So population growth coming back, it's hard to say when that'll happen. It's unpredictable because the storms that we had right on the heels of an election and right before holiday season, it's really unprecedented. There's no model for it. So hopefully we start to see the market come back. We see demand come back. We see improvement in population and we see interest rates soften. And that could ultimately fuel a rebound of our real estate market. But until then, it's going to be a grind. The homes that are going to sell are going to be the ones that are the most aggressively priced, the ones that are in the best condition. The idea that you could throw something on the market like you could a couple of years ago that needed a bunch of work and it would fly off the shelf, that's just not likely right now. We are going to see a transition from a seller's market to pretty close to a buyer's market in residential real estate over the next couple of months. And again, of course, there are segments of the market that buck the trend one way or the other. Of course, there are neighborhoods that do better than others. But when we're talking about the MSA and Tampa Bay overall, that's going to be the trend of what we're going to continue to see.